Hello everyone, I am the Meta Kirby, and welcome to my channel, The Commander Tavern. The Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic the Gathering format. The Brewery is a series on this channel showcasing my spicy brews and other deck techs. On this episode of The Brewery, I'll be discussing my take on a commander from March of the Machine, Rona, Herald of Invasion. If you like this deck or any of the cards I'll be mentioning throughout the video, please consider using my TCG Player affiliate link when purchasing those cards. You can find that link down in the description. It'll really help out the channel. But the very best way you can help support the channel is with my Patreon. There are plenty of perks for being a patron, such as early access to certain videos, exclusive deck techs, gifts, and more. You can also support my channel for free by simply liking, subscribing, and sharing, which also helps out a lot. I put out a video every Monday, so you don't want to miss out. You can join my Discord server for free if you want to join the Commander Tavern community. All pertinent links are down in the description. Alright, let's get back to the episode. Rona is a 1/3 human wizard for 1 generic and 1 blue. Since she has an activated ability with black Phyrexian mana, she has a blue-black color identity. Her front side has the potential for infinite combos, so she can tap to loot a card but untaps whenever you cast a legendary spell. One prominent combo is Mox Amber with either Banishing Knack or Retraction Helix. The way this works is that casting Mox Amber, a legendary spell, will untap Rona. Once you have the Mox in play, use it to cast either of these instants targeting Rona. Rona can now tap to bounce Mox Amber. Casting it will once again untap Rona. You can then tap the Mox for blue mana. Then you bounce it with Rona and do it all over again for infinite blue mana and an infinite storm count. There are so many outlets for this combo that mentioning them alone is its own video. Suffice it to say that it's a lot. However, these combos are not the focus of my video. While her front side has a ton of potential, this deck is more focused on her completed side, which is what you get when you transform her. Rona Tolarian Obliterator is the actual commander of this deck. She's now Phyrexian and 5/5 with Trample. Whenever a source deals damage to her, that source's controller exiles a random card from their hand. If it's a land, you may put it onto your battlefield. If not a land, you can cast it for free. Since it's part of the trigger, you can cast it after the trigger resolves, regardless of non-land card type. While it's fun to make opponents sweat since blocking with Rona or having Rona blocked means potentially stealing a random card from their hand, notice that Rona isn't limited to your opponents. This means that if we dealt damage to Rona, we get the effect from ourselves. So we can play a random card from our hand. This is the direction I took the deck in. In order to be able to deal damage to Rona, the deck is running a handful of pinging effects, both targeted and global, which will not only help us trigger Rona, but also help us deal with any threats on board. This means that these effects are good with or without Rona in play. Starting with the pingers, I'm running Prodigal Sorcerer, Rootwater Hunter, Sokata Firewalker, Thornwind Fairies, Zoran Spellcaster, Capricious Sorcerer, Apprentice Sorcerer, and Wu Longbowman. All these do is tap to deal 1 damage to any target, dealing with creatures, opponents, planeswalkers, or any battles we might be playing, although I'm not playing any battles here. The last 3 unfortunately cannot be activated at instant speed whenever we want, since they're limited to being activated only before our combat step. But that's fine since they still get the job done. We can also turn any creature into a pinger with Thornbite Staff. Unfortunately, it requires 2 mana to activate when equipped to a creature. However, that's just a bonus. The main point of running Thornbite Staff is that it untaps the equipped creature whenever any creature dies. So if we were to give the equipped creature Death Touch with either Basilisk Collar, Gorgon Flail, Gorgon's Head, or Vorpal Sword, it becomes a board wipe machine gun. This is why these pingers are good not just for triggering Rona, but for getting rid of pesky creatures as well. As a bonus, we can also use Vorpal Sword as a straight up player removal effect. It can be activated so that the equipped creature will destroy whatever opponent it deals combat damage to. Basilisk Collar also has the bonus of giving the equipped creature lifelink. This adds up, especially if equipped to one of the bombs we're expected to cheat into play. Going back to untapping these pingers, Jace Ingenious Mind Mage and Intruder Alarm help with just that. Thanks to Jace's second ability, we can untap our battalion of pingers to potentially gang up on a huge creature, deal a ton of damage to an opponent, or trigger Rona multiple times. His other abilities are also useful, such as drawing us a card with his other +1 ability, or stealing 3 creatures with his ultimate. Intruder Alarm is also epic here at untapping all of our creatures. This is why Forbidden Orchard is also included. Since it creates a token for an opponent, we can tap this for mana while also untapping all of our creatures. It also adds mana of any color, which is quite useful if we stole anything with an activated ability outside of our colors. Going back to pinging, Pestilence and Withering Wisps also get the job done. These also have the potential of wiping the board as well as ending the game should we have more life than the rest of the table. Pestilence is pretty straightforward, but Withering Wisps, a card most of you probably haven't even seen or heard of, is like a nerfed Pestilence. This is because you can't activate it in a single turn more times than the number of snow-covered swamps you control. So if you controlled 3 snow-covered swamps, you can only activate it at most 3 times a turn. That's fine because all the deck's basics are snow-covered, plus Ice Tunnel is here. It's also running Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth. Urborg makes all of our snow-covered islands into swamps, which helps for Withering Wisp's condition. You could see this as a bonus though, since Urborg is not just here for the enchantment but for Cabal Coffers and Cabal Stronghold too. While the Stronghold only counts basic lands, keep in mind that the snow-covered islands will count to it if they're swamps as well with Urborg. In any case, these sources help us be able to activate these enchantments a bunch of times, and at instant speed too. Now, in order to protect Rona from dying, Darksteel Plate, Shield of Kaldra, Hammer of Nazan, and Kaldra Complete are included to give her Indestructible. These are obviously more useful than simply giving Rona Indestructible. Once we have multiple indestructible effects in play, we can protect our other utility creatures or bombs if it comes down to it. As a bonus, the first two are indestructible themselves, while the hammer helps auto-equip equipment when they enter the battlefield. Kaldra Complete is absolutely busted since it can exile creatures. Gift of Doom also gives indestructible, but it's slightly more fragile than the previously shown equipment since it is an aura. That being said, it also gives Death Touch, which is also relevant in the deck as previously shown. That which was taken and Tyrite Sanctum help give indestructible counters, essentially. The first one has to stick around because they're divinity counters, which isn't an outright indestructible counter like the land. Thanks to the land though, we can give an indestructible counter to Rona and not worry too much about it. Eldrazi Monument is the best one though, since it not only gives indestructible to all of our creatures, but also +1/+1 and flying. Not like our bombs needed the boon, but making them fly will make it much easier to win with them. The downside is having to sacrifice a creature each upkeep, but that really isn't an issue for this deck. Champion's Helm, Giant's Amulet, and Swiftfoot Boots are also included, even though they don't give indestructible. However, I mention them because we do not want to be giving Shroud in this deck. That prevents the target damage effects from hitting Rona. So Hexproof is the way to go here. Going back to why we're doing all of this in the first place is to be able to cheat cards from our hand. However, they're at random. So what if you have interaction or counterspells in your hand? Surely you don't want to exile them from your hand. Fear not, that's what Dream Devourer and Gusta's Scepter are for. Here are some more cards you've probably never seen nor even heard of, especially the second one. With the creature, you can simply foretell the counterspells in your hand, or any other spell for that matter, that you don't want exiled with Rona before her trigger resolves. That way they're foretold and not in your hand. You can then cast them later when needed. The Scepter does the same thing but for just tapping. It also costs 0 to cast, which is amazing. You can then tap it to return any of those exiled cards back to your hand when you need them, and if the artifact were to leave the battlefield or taken away, those cards go to your graveyard so they don't remain exiled. I love this artifact, especially in this Rona deck that I built. Alright, after seeing how we're not only damaging Rona to free cast random things from our hand, what do we want to free cast? Surely all this work must have a huge payoff, right? It sure does. How does it feel free casting things like Artisan of Kozilek, Hand of Emrakul, It That Betrays, Kozilek Butcher of Truth, Pathraiser of Ulamog, Spawnsire of Ulamog, Ulamog's Crusher, and Ulamog the Infinite Gyre? If you notice, all of these Eldrazi monsters have Annihilator. Go big or go home, I always say. While some of these have other benefits to them, especially the Spawnsire since it can create sacrifice fodder for Eldrazi Monument, they're here solely to instill absolute fear into the hearts of our opponents. Imagine cheating any of these, or bunches of them, at the beginning of the end step of the turn before ours. Absolute madness. Same with Bane of Balagad and Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger. These also have an Annihilator type trigger, but worse since the cards are exiled and not sacrificed. These aren't only bombs though, since the deck is also running Emrakul the Promised End, Kozilek the Great Distortion, and Void Winnower for some beats as well as disruption. Emrakul can absolutely wreck someone's turn while Kozilek helps us counterbalance things. Void Winnower is very evil stacks effects, so cheating this in early can be quite backbreaking. Breaker of Armies and Desolation Twin are the remaining bombs in the deck are included solely for the power and dominance. While these might make it seem like the deck is dependent on Rona, keep in mind that we have an insane mana acceleration thanks to Urborg plus the Cabal lands. The deck also has mana acceleration effects, but we'll see those later on. Crashing Drawbridge is included not only to give our pingers haste, but if we cheated these behemoths during our own turn. So this wall also has multiple uses here. However, death by annihilation can happen even faster with the following interaction: Null Profusion and Omniscience. Omniscience is not only redundancy for what we want to achieve with Rona, but it also combos amazingly with Null Profusion. Whenever we play a card, meaning that it will also trigger off of lands we play as our land drop, we draw a card, feeding into Omniscience. Then, if we get stuck behind a handful of lands, we can ping Rona to drop the lands. While it's very unlikely to run out of steam, especially since the deck is running all 7 fetch lands to thin it of lands, it is possible. However, it's amazing to just vomit out our hand into possibly the entire deck, and Omniscience has the potential of being free if we cheated it in play with Rona. Null Profusion does have the drawback of reducing our hand size to just 2, but we have Reliquary Tower, Thought Vessel, and Decanter of Endless Water for that. If we played any of these 3 cards after Null Profusion, then they have a later timestamp, and that is the effect that will be considered during our cleanup step, thus giving us a limited hand size. Plus, the mana rocks also double as mana acceleration, so there's that. Necropotence also takes advantage of these abilities, allowing us to keep more than 7 cards in our hand, so we can pay a large amount of life to have a large hand of cards. And if we're pinging Rona at instant speed, this can also keep fueling Omniscience as well. So it's like a backup to Null Profusion, but we're limited to only getting those cards in our hand at the beginning of our end step and at the cost of 1 life each time. Good thing we can potentially give lifelink to one of our Eldrazi monsters. The final spells in the deck are the much needed interaction, card advantage, and mana acceleration pieces. And no deck should be without interaction. This one is no exception. As previously mentioned, we want to be able to keep our counterspells up and not accidentally have them exiled at random with Rona. These counterspells being Fierce Guardianship, An Offer You Can't Refuse, Swan Song, Negate, Counterspell, and Mana Drain. Mana Drain is the cheapest it's been in a long time. This also essentially doubles as mana acceleration in this deck, since it could potentially give us a ton of colorless mana for our Eldrazi. Black Market Connections and Phyrexian Arena also help with card advantage at the cost of life. The first one is a better Phyrexian Arena, but Arena is still good. It gives treasure and sacrifice fodder for Eldrazi Monument, which is super useful. Yet, these are still slow when compared to the previously mentioned black card advantage enchantments. Seagate Restoration is an absolute bomb when cast and doesn't take up a spell slot in the deck if you're not greedy and use it as a land when needed. As a bonus, it's yet another way to give us a limitless hand size that can't even be interacted with, since it's like a pseudo emblem. Only Karn Liberated's ultimate gets rid of this effect. Speaking of lands, Navigation Orb and Wayfarer's Bauble are the deck's land-based mana acceleration. Even if you don't draw them early game, they're still good mid to late game for casting big spells. Same with Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, and Felwar Stone, the deck's remaining mana rocks. Felwar Stone isn't included just because it's a 2 CMC mana rock that enters untapped. Keep in mind that more than likely we will be stealing things from our opponent's hands, so this helps us pay for any activated abilities outside of our colors. Same with Exotic Orchard, Mana Confluence, and City of Brass. With the handful of cards that can tap for any color or opponent's colors, we should be set. So if you're playing Rona to steal things, make sure you add some ways to generate mana outside of your colors. The rest of the deck is just the rest of the lands. The deck's running Sunken Hollow, Watery Grave, Faded Pools, Contaminated Aquifer, Command Tower, and Ancient Tomb, as well as 6 of each snow-covered basic due to Withering Wisps, requiring our swamps to be snow-covered. As with all of my deck techs, you can build your mana base according to your budget. Whether you include more expensive cards or even cheaper cards is up to you. You do you. This brew is just an idea of how to build around Rona, Herald of Invasion. While there are definitely many ways of building Rona, I decided to make the most of her Phyrexian side since that seemed more interesting to me. You can definitely combo off rather quickly with her front side since she only costs 2 mana and the mana rocks are free. Plus the instants cost only 1 blue. With access to black, you can also run every possible tutor. She might even have some fringe CDH potential. However, I kept it mid-range and exciting since what you want to steal or free cast is random. If you're interested in the deck list of this spicy brew of mine, you can find a link to it down in the description. I would like to thank all my patrons for supporting me, and a quick shout out to all my higher tier patrons, the brewers, for their patronage. I'd also like to thank anyone using my TCG Player affiliate link. That also helps out the channel. And to everyone, thanks for watching this episode of The Brewery on the Commander Tavern. I am the Meta Kirby, and happy brewing.